Hello and welcome. If you haven't already, I invite you to please click subscribe. There's no obligation, and it allows you to be notified of all new chapters. Additional information about the story, including the author, chapter warnings, and rating, can be found in the description below. All credit goes to the original author. All That Remains by Orphan Account. Chapter 16. Lose Yourself to Darkness. Third Age, 2956. 55 years ago. Legolas decided that he hated welcoming feasts, and parties, and celebrations of any kind. There were too many people, all of whom were too loud, and many of whom were noisy, inquisitive, irritating beings that were always staring at him. Now that Aragorn had been found, a formal feast had been thrown together to welcome Elrond and his party to Mirkwood. Along with it, the formal introduction of Estelle, son of Elrond, to the royal family and the council had occurred, most of the elves welcoming the man. Esgol had also been formally introduced, dressed in formal clothes that Fael had let him borrow to the formal party. Legolas hated formal. He hated parties. He hated being stuck inside a room filled with people, forced to make small talk with elves that approached him. He hated being faced with the same reactions to him and questions being asked again and again. The elf would be shocked that he did not glow. They would freeze as they saw his violet eyes. They would be surprised that he had saved the Elven King not once but twice, and was also the mysterious warrior and protector that had been killing orcs for so long. "Why don't you glow?" they would ask. "Why are your eyes violet? Are you really the guardian? Why did you hide yourself?" And so on. Deciding that some of the answers were none of their damn business, Legolas would respond with half-truths and vague answers. He was suppressing his glow. He had violet eyes as long as he could remember, so there. Yes, he was the guardian, idiots. He would never answer the last one at all, avoiding doing so completely, and only staring at the moron who asked, with narrowed violet eyes, until they left him alone. The questions and responses became so repetitive that he was ready to bash his head against a wall, or chuck a knife at the next person who asked. But Siren had taught him patience, so the assassin endured. Still, his patience was wearing dangerously thin, and he found himself fingering the knives he had hidden beneath his borrowed formal clothes more than once. He did not like the silky, emerald-green tunic and leggings that Fael had given him. He missed his own clothes, cloak and face mask. At least he had been allowed to keep his boots, though Princess Hanel, who was apparently visiting from Lothlorien, had frowned at his choice of footwear. The royal family's views on Esgol were mixed. Fael, Thranduil, Megalag, and Barhad accepted him openly, trusting him immediately because he had saved the Elven King and had fought for the light from the shadows for years. Aglar, Hanel, and Baraneth remained wary. The Crown Prince and the oldest princess hid their suspicion well, but Legolas could see their tension and aversion. Baraneth openly glared at him whenever he thought he would not notice. He did not need to be a mind reader to know their thoughts. He has no glow. He is unnatural. He is dangerous. He killed all those orcs. He is deadly. We do not know where he is from. He is an enigma. He is suspicious. How can we trust him? It was the thoughts of many elves from the shadow-touched woodland realm. While many were willing to trust their Elven King's judgment, others would not accept such a powerful ally. Esgol was too secretive, too different, too deadly for them to trust him yet. The elves' opinions of him did not matter to Legolas, though, and he was not about to go out of his way to make every elf in Mirkwood like him. He was happy enough with the approval of Fael, Thranduil, Megalag, Barhad, Elladan, Elrohir, Elrond, and Erestor from Rivendell. These elves, who he had heard about from Glorfindel and interacted with, accepted him despite his uniqueness and skills. Along with Aragorn, the violet-eyed elf had somehow begun a friendship with the twins and Fael. One moment they had just met, the next, Legolas found himself comfortable and content to talk and laugh with all four of them. For an unknown reason, the assassin found himself staying closest to Fael and siding with him on many discussions against the twins. Perhaps it was because Fael was being ganged up on by the two of them, or because they were both from Mirkwood, but Legolas felt closer and more trusting of the silver-haired prince. At the same time, the rejection of the two princesses and crown prince hurt the pale blonde-haired elf deeply. He did not understand it. He did not care about what many elves and strangers thought of him, but their shunning made almost physical pain shoot through Legolas's heart. Why should their opinions affect him so much? Legolas groaned mentally as another inquisitive elf approached him, an Eleth this time. He had quickly learned to be on guard around them. Few that were at the party were warriors, and most were interested in flirting. Legolas was most certainly not interested. He did not care about love, and would continue to not care for a long time. He was immortal. He had plenty of time to search for a mate later, if he ever became interested, long after the shadow was destroyed. Right now, an Eleth's attempts only made him internally cringe. These Eleths did not know him, which led to two reasons for their interest: his looks or his reputation. The violet-eyed elf knew that he was handsome and beautiful, as all Eldar are, but also knew that his unique features and mysteriousness would attract the opposite sex like flies. He hated that they were interested only because of his looks and the stories told about him, not because of who he was and his personality. It sickened him, especially with being brought up by tales of Ethne and Siren's love. They were life mates, not a sudden infatuation based on appearance and legend. Tired of it all, Legolas pretended not to see the Eleth approaching him, and turned around, walking purposely towards the door. Formality or not, if he had to deal with one more idiot, he was going to throw a dagger at someone, preferably the idiot. Why was he even here anyway? Oh, right. Apparently, the party was to welcome all guests, including him. Formalities sucked. "Are you ready to jump off a cliff yet?" a voice asked teasingly in his ear. Legolas turned and glared at Fael, not impressed by his joke. "No, but I swear that I'm going to kill the next moron that tries to talk to me." "They're not all idiots," the prince mock protested. "They're just a little lacking in the warrior mindset department." "They are counselors, the nobles of this realm," the assassin stated. "Scholars and strategists for the most part, with only a few having taken part in war or battle. Either that, or their new posts have made them forget what it was like to truly fight the shadow." He gave the prince a helpless look. "How can they not understand I do not wish to speak about my past?" The silver-haired elf winced. Everyone wants to know a good story. Only the warriors and those who truly face the shadow truly know what it and its servants are like. You are a puzzle people want to solve. "They had better be careful then," Legolas said darkly. "My pieces will cut them if they are not." He spotted the Eleth walking towards him again and groaned. Fael snickered in an unprincely manner. "I see that you are having trouble with the maidens as well." "They're like wolves. They've been stalking me all night," the assassin muttered. "I meant my threat about the next fool that tries to talk to or flirt with me, and I would rather not cause an incident. I'm out of here." Fael chuckled as he watched the violet-eyed elf make a hasty retreat, leaving so quickly it was like he vanished out of thin air. The silver-haired elf glanced at the Eleth and froze as his green orbs met determined brown eyes. Apparently, after seeing her original target leave, the Elf had picked a new Ellen to bother. Him. With the dignity of a prince and the gracefulness of the elder, Fael fled out the door right after the assassin. Aglar watched his brother follow Esgil, and could not stop the worry that came as Fael followed the mysterious elf alone. The crown prince knew that the silver-haired elf trusted the other and could take care of himself, but Aglar still tensed at the thought of his brother being with a stranger. He could not follow them, however. As crown prince, he had to stay at the gathering, exchanging niceties with the guests and playing the part of the Elven King's heir. That had not stopped him from observing the people around him, keeping his eye on his siblings as they spread out among the other elves. Hannah was with her husband Lakon, sitting at the table and smiling delicately as Bar had softly told her a recent discovery he had made while scouring the archives. Megalag was near one wall, flirting with a few Eleth for the first time in years. Aglar did not know what had brightened his brother's spirits, but the silver-gold-haired elf seemed happier and more relaxed than he had been in years. Baraneth was speaking animatedly with Tolui, while glaring warningly at any Ellen that started to approach her. She, unlike the males, could get away with punching those who flirted with her, and she knew it. The male elves knew it as well and kept their distance. Fael was now gone, following the elf that Aglar found that he could not trust. "What is troubling you, Eonin?" Thranduil asked, noticing his son's posture. Fael just left, the crown prince reported. He was following Esgil. "Oh?" The Elven King laughed, looking at the many disappointed Eleth with amusement. "I think that I know why they have abandoned this gathering." "Are you sure we should trust Esgil?" Aglar murmured, an edge in his tone. Thranduil looked at his son. "Why shouldn't we? He saved my life and is a solid ally in our fight against the Shadow." The crown prince shifted on his feet. "He is also an enigma, and a loose cannon, Adar." The Elven King frowned at Aglar. "Is he?" "He is dangerous," the silver-haired elf stressed. "Aren't we all?" Thranduil asked mildly. "He's an assassin," Aglar hissed at last, deciding to be blunt. "You saw yourself how efficiently he killed the human assassin that tried to kill you. I have read the warrior's reports. Esgil has no past loyalties, many unnatural skills and powers, and has a past that he is reluctant to share with us." His father's blue eyes pierced him, pinning him in place. "Unnatural? Are you suspicious of him because of his eyes and his lack of a glow?" "Added to how skilled of a killer he is, yes," Aglar admitted stiffly. Thranduil shook his head sadly, placing a hand on his eldest son's shoulder. "You are only seeing what Esgil can do and what he looks like, not the elf he is inside." There was disappointment in his tone, making Aglar's stomach clench in response. He hated disappointing his father. It reminded him too much of the times he had returned from the patrol so many years ago. Thranduil was not faded, grieving, or tired now, but he had the same grim look in his eyes. This time the Elven King was stern, strong, and set in his decision as he looked upon his heir. "That's not," Aglar began, but his father interrupted him before he could defend himself. "I know that I am not the most accepting elf, but I had hoped you had not gained my suspicious nature. Esgil is not an enemy just because he is unique, deadly, and has secrets. I want you to see that. That being said, I expect you to get to know Esgil," he said firmly. "Do not judge him for what he has been trained to do, or what he looks like. Judge him for who he is." Aglar bit his lip and bowed slightly. "I will try, Adar," he said. Thranduil smiled at him. "Good. Now, enjoy the party, Aglar. Tomorrow you will be stuck in negotiations with me when the dwarves from Erebor arrive with their new ideas for a trading agreement." The Crown Prince spoke with a voice that was almost a whine. "Are you sure there isn't a patrol I could lead instead?" His father smirked at him, blue eyes glinting. "If I have to suffer through the negotiations, you have to suffer with me." Aglar grimaced. "Yes, Adar." Esgol sat up in a tree just outside the gate, leaning back against the bark with Fael at his side. The twins were a couple branches lower, and Aragorn was below them. The five were chattering about nothing, just relieved to be outside and away from the hustle and bustle of the palace and the party. The four elves claimed that they had left for peace and quiet, which the ranger suspected was at least partially true for the assassin. But Aragorn knew for a fact that the twins had been targeted by the daughters of the counselors and other elves at the party. The man had been greatly amused when the twins had bade a hasty retreat out of the room, meeting with Esgol and Fael outside. Now all five were outside the palace, just inside the forest, as the day slowly turned into night. Elrohir and Elladan began a competition of who could name more constellations and stars than the other. The other three watched them with amusement as they grew increasingly animated, squabbling with each other as they began to repeat old answers. "I already said that one," Elrohir accused, glaring at the older twin. "You did not," Elladan defended. "I would have remembered if you did." "You're cheating because I am winning," the younger twin said with a sniff. "Am not," the elder protested, tackling his brother. Other races would have been horrified by the move being used so far up from the ground, but for elves there was no risk of falling. The still light tree holding the elves would not let them fall, laughing softly in their ears as the two older brothers tussled in its boughs. Aragorn and Fael guffawed with it, while Esgol chuckled quietly above them. The assassin, much more at ease out here than he had been inside the palace, dropped down next to Aragorn, peering up at the play-fighting elves. "Do they always act like this?" he asked curiously, as Elrohir succeeded in pinning his brother down on the tree limb. Elladan retaliated by tickling the younger, making him yelp and release him. "Yes," the ranger and Fael chorused in matching exasperated tones. Hearing this, the twins paused, turning to stare at the two. "Don't act all innocent," Elladan huffed. "You're just as bad at home, Estelle." "And you helped us replace Aristar's meeting minute scrolls with tips on how to get an Eleth when you came to Rivendell, Fael," Elrohir added triumphantly. "Since I have been away from your terrible influence, I have matured," the prince said coolly, but his green eyes sparkled. "I'm only 25. What's your excuse?" the ranger said. The twins slowly looked at each other, and identical evil grins appeared on their faces. "Get them!" they shouted, leaping at the two. Aragorn gave an undignified squawk and retreated to the ground, while Fael squeaked and fled further up the tree. The twins ganged up on the prince, holding him down and tickling him. "Look, he laughs like an elfling," Elladan said with a smirk. "And you call yourself a big elf." "Stop that," Fael gasped, between laughs, mirthful tears running down his cheeks. "Ha! Esgol, help!" The violet-eyed elf looked lazily up at the twins and their captive. "Please let Fael go," he said casually. "Or what?" Elrohir challenged. Esgol idly brushed a strand of hair behind his pointed ear. "If you do not, I will sneak into your rooms, put honey on your eyebrows, write dunce on your foreheads, replace all of your clothes with maidens' dresses, and dye your hair a beautiful shade of petunia pink, all while you sleep." The twins froze, staring at him. "You wouldn't," Aladen said slowly. And couldn't. We'll be on our guard now. Esgol gave him a deadpan look. I have snuck into Rivendell, Lothlorien, Edoras, Minas Tirith, and some of the most shadowed or most heavily guarded places in the world. I'm pretty sure that I could manage to do all of that without you noticing. His 4 friends balked, gazing at him with wide eyes. However, it was not the assassin's threat of a prank that stunned them. Have you really gotten into those cities without being seen? Aragorn asked the elf. Esgol nodded, still casual, though slightly confused, as if he did not understand how that was special. Of course I have. They continued to stare. The pale, blonde-haired elf shifted beneath their intense eyes. Then the twins turned and looked at each other, a message passing between them. 2 sets of identical silver eyes fell on Esgol once more, blazing and glittering almost manically. Esgol, Aladen said solemnly, a glint in his eyes and a sinister grin on his face. Can we use your skills for our own amusement and evil purposes? Oh, no, 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 Fael interrupted before the assassin could answer. If he is going to be on anyone's side in a prank war, it's going to be mine. I'm all by myself against you 3. He pointed at the 3 sons of Elrond dramatically, then winked at Esgol. Besides, we Mirkwood elves need to stick together. Esgol smiled back at him, a full grin that revealed his pearly white teeth. Then his smile vanished, and he looked down, violet eyes narrowing. Aragorn recognized the expression on the assassin's face. What's coming? He asked urgently, wishing he had thought to bring his weapons with him. But, of course, his bow, swords, and dagger had all been left in his room for the party. It is not an enemy that comes, Esgol reported quickly, dropping down next to the man. It is just Amalug. He said the name neutrally, but alarm bells went off in the ranger's head. Elrohir, Aladen, and Fael descended to the ground as well, all looking in the same direction as the assassin. A moment later, Amalug emerged from the foliage, scowling and angry-looking as was his norm. He glared particularly at Aragorn, eyes narrowed and lips thin with dislike. The feeling was mutual. So this is where you ran off to, the elf said coolly. I had hoped that Lord Elrond taught you some basic protocol and manners. He continued to glare at the man like everything was his fault. We are out here as well, Amalug, Aladen pointed out calmly, expression neutral. It was not just Estelle that left the welcoming party. I can assure you that my family is not offended by their absence, Fael added with a smile that had to be fake. The warrior ignored them, still glowering at Aragorn. Suddenly he lashed out, hand wrapping around the man's wrist. The ranger grunted in pain as the elf's strong grip tightened threateningly. He knew that a small twist would be enough to break his bone. His elven companions froze, realizing the same thing. Amalug glared at him with furious hazel eyes, close enough that the man could see flecks of blue and green in the midst of the brownish orbs. You are weak, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, he spat, not acknowledging the 3 glowing elves as they stiffened. It is the corruption of your race that allows a shadow to plague this land. How dare Elrond shelter filth like you, a mortal whose ancestor is the reason darkness exists in the world? Aragorn was struck mute, eyes wide with horror as the elf snarled the name that was not safe, that could not be spoken aloud, not even here so close to the palace. Fael and the twins were also shocked and alarmed, but were unable to act with the ranger still in Amalug's grasp. Only Esgol was calm and unsurprised, regarding the angry elf with calculating violet eyes. Amalug, the assassin spoke the warrior's name, gaining his attention. Let him go, please." His voice was soft, calm, and pleasant, and his expression was blank and empty, as if he were merely asking the elf to pass him the sugar. But Aragorn could hear something in his tone, something more dangerous and deadly than a warg's growl. Amalug's sharp elven hearing must have been failing him, because he did not heed the subtle threat in Esgil's tone. Instead, he sneered at the violet-eyed elf and challenged him. "Make me." Quick as a blink, Esgil struck, gripping Amalug's hand between his finger and thumb. The other elf gave a gasp of pain, his other hand loosening its hold on Aragorn's arm as agony shot through his left arm into his torso. Still standing, the elf curled up slightly, eyes wide and mouth open in mute torment. The assassin's expression had not changed, remaining scarily neutral. He did not speak, holding the pressure point for a moment longer in silent warning. Then he released Amalug, and the elf stumbled back, cradling his hand. There was not even a bruise on his skin. The warrior flexed his fingers, glaring at Esgil. Then his hate-filled gaze returned to Aragorn, and his lips drew back in a snarl. For a moment, the man was sure that the elf was going to attack him once more. But Amalug only spat at him, before turning on his heel and storming away, back towards the palace. Esgil watched him go, waiting until he disappeared in the trees before speaking. "Dolorsian." "How did you do that?" Thale questioned, impressed. "A pressure point," the assassin replied. He turned to Aragorn. "Are you all right?" "Yes," the man said, pulling up his sleeve to reveal a bruised wrist. Elrohir winced and gently took the appendage, probing carefully around the spot. "It's merely bruised, not strained or fractured." A scowl crossed his face. "I'm going to kill that Dolorsian, or at least get Ada to kick him out. Not only did he hurt you, but he also—" He stopped abruptly, looking nervously at Esgil. "Ah." "I won't tell anyone about Estelle's heritage," the elf reassured them all, truly calm once more now that Amalug was away. Elladan nodded shortly, hovering at Aragorn's right elbow. "Let's get back to the palace. We need to tell Ada about this." With this mission in mind, they returned to the palace, only to discover that the party was over and the guests were heading home. After questioning a few elves, they tracked down Elrond to be with Thranduil in the king's study. Thale led the way to a simple oak door in the center of the palace. The prince knocked 3 times, waiting until a voice called "Enter," before walking into the room with the others. Thranduil, Elrond, Glorfindel, and Erestor were all leaning over a document, the half-elven elf lord pointing something out on the page. Glorfindel grinned cheerfully at them. "I was wondering where you troublemakers ran off to. Have you caused any havoc yet?" "No," Elladan said grimly, no joking in his tone. "Amalug just attacked Estelle." That caught their attention faster than the word of any pranks could. "What?" Elrond snarled, the dangerous expression he wore only when one of his children was threatened, darkening the usually serene lord's aura. Elladan explained the encounter in short, sharp sentences, the elf lord checking over Aragorn's wrist, while his eldest son spoke. The elves reacted with a mixture of anger, disgust, shock, and horror. It was Elrond's reaction that was the most severe, however. The elf lord was not angry. He was livid. Silver eyes blazing with rage, and his teeth were clenched so tightly the knuckles were white. It was the rare times like these that Aragorn spotted Elrond, the warrior who fought in the last alliance of men and elves, instead of the calm, serene, healing elf lord he was used to. The Paradel looked ready to take up his sword and slaughter Amalug. Not that the man would complain if he did. "This is the last straw," Elrond growled, fist slamming down on the desktop and making half the people in the room jump. "If Amalug thinks he would be able to get away with attacking my son, he is about to get a wake-up call." He stormed out of the study like an angel of death, presence so filled with fury and barely contained rage that any elves he encountered in the hall fled before his wrath. The other elves and one man followed the elf lord as he tracked down the object of his ire. Amalug was with Rainier and Euelos in the garden when Elrond found him. The two not-shadowed warriors noticed their angered lord first, and both leapt to their feet, paling as if Sauron himself had found them as they gauged the silver-eyed elf's mood. Amalug, on the other hand, looked up lazily, an unconcerned expression on his face. The cold warrior froze as his eyes met Elrond's deadly ones. Aragorn saw him swallow reflexively. "My lord, did you honestly think I would let this go?" The paradol began without preamble, voice livid and cold. "Did you honestly believe that I would ignore the fact that you attacked my son?" Said son saw shocked, horrified, and angry expressions form on Rainier and Euelos' faces. It was obvious they did not know about the other's deeds, and were disgusted and stunned by them. Meanwhile, Amalug seemed to lose his fear, a calculating and emotionless mask covering his features. He stared at Elrond levelly. "Explain your actions," the elf lord commanded. Amalug's gaze darkened. "I shouldn't have to defend myself. My actions were justified." Aragorn swore that his father was going to throttle the other elf. But Elrond kept his distance, hands twitching the slightest bit as if he were holding back from striking the warrior. "Please tell me how you assaulting my son was justified." If a person's tone alone could kill, Amalug would already be in Mandos's halls. The warrior's barely kept front shattered, his mask falling to reveal an expression that defined unrelenting rage. Despite himself, Aragorn flinched away from the elf, the look twisting his features, making him seem like a demented, distorted monster. It was almost like looking at an orc in an elf's pale, glowing skin. "Isildur is the reason the One Ring still exists, and Sauron still haunts this land," Amalug spat. "He is the reason orcs still exist, and why they existed to kill my family. And yet you think that Aragorn will resist the corruption of his race and save Middle-earth?" With each word, the warrior grew more angry, more and more hatred, making his voice animal-like snarl. "You are a fool. You call him the hope of men, but I know that he will fail and fall, just like his ancestors. He won't lead us to salvation. He will destroy everything." Elrond did not shrink away as the elf yelled in his face, keeping a stoic, impassive mask in place. But when he spoke, his voice held nothing but contempt. "You disgust me. You claim that men are corrupt, yet you lash out like an animal with misplaced blame and vengeance on Aragorn and the race of man in general. You think that elves are superior to humans, and yet you have fallen so far. Ever since your family passed, you have been reckless, selfish, and a danger to all around you. You disobeyed orders, attacked human settlements, and forced your allies into situations that have gotten many injured or killed. Again and again, I passed off your actions as grief-driven and let you go with only a reprimand. But my tolerance has reached its end." Elrond stood, tall and proud, before his warrior, eyes unforgiving and icy. "You hurt my son and revealed information that not only puts him, but all of Rivendell at risk. This crime is one I will never forgive. To attack one's lord or his family, and knowingly endanger their lives and my realm, is treason. You know the punishment for treason." Amalug paled slightly and moved as if to speak, but the Lord of Imladris did not let him. "Amalug of Imladris, I hereby banish you from Rivendell and all other elven realms," Elrond stated, the image of an elven lord. Cold, uncaring, distant, apathetic, regal, icy. Aragorn was shocked, but not surprised by his father's statement. For immortal elves, exile from all elven realms, from all places they could find their kin, was almost as bad as a death sentence for humans. Forever was a long time for those who had no one to spend it with. If you step foot within any of the realms, for any reason, you will be imprisoned until your immortal life ends. The Paradel looked down upon the exiled elf with contempt. "You have one day to remove yourself from the elven realm of Mirkwood. I suggest you start walking." For a moment, the ranger thought that the elf was not going to move. Then the proud warrior spun on his heel, not speaking a word, and stalked to the gates. He paused, right under the archway, turning to glare intently at the man. He did not break his silence, but Aragorn could read the message in his eyes. "You will pay." As Amalug disappeared into the forest, and the elves around him, minus Esgil, all relaxed, said elves discussing what had happened in soft voices, Aragorn felt no relief, and a glance at the assassin's narrowed eyes told the ranger that Esgil was not feeling less worried either. The leader of a group of vengeful, angry elves was now gone from Rivendell, and Aragorn would no longer have to face accusing glares and hate-filled scowls every day. He should be happy, but he was not. Somehow, deep in his heart, the man knew that he would run into Amalug again. The confrontation was not going to be a happy one. In fact, he had a feeling it was going to be quite bloody. Vengeful elves never forgot, and they never forgave. He was shocked. He was confused. But most of all, Amalug, exiled elf formerly from Rivendell, was enraged. How dare Elrond cast him out? How dare that miserable half-elf banish him, exile him because he attacked the Lord's precious son? Son. How any elf could see a weak man as a son was beyond Amalug. His lip curled in disgust at the mere thought of being attached to a mortal at all. Still, Elrond had put the importance of that short-lived, weak, pathetic human over him, a warrior and proud immortal of Rivendell. He had fought in the last alliance many centuries ago. He had gone with his family to Imladris afterwards in the hope of starting a new life. He had remained loyal to his lord and realm, yet Elrond had the gall to cast him aside like trash just because he attacked Aragorn. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur. Amalug knew that his unprovoked attack was justified. It was Isildur's fault that the One Ring was not destroyed. It was that stupid man's greed that caused the Shadow and Sauron to plague and slowly suffocate Middle-earth. Even being raised by elves would not help Aragorn resist the weakness of his ancestry and race. Aragorn would fail. He would not defeat Sauron. He would either come across the ring and give it back to the Dark Lord, or he would not be strong enough to overcome the enemy and his forces. He would die in battle, or be executed, or run away and die as an old man, a failure and alone. The former Rivendell warrior knew this to be true. He knew of the weakness and corruption of man all too well. The shadow of Sauron would not be defeated or even hindered by one so small and insignificant as a human. "Come to me." Amalug halted in his tracks and looked around in bewilderment. He looked around himself, seeing nothing but trees. But he had been sure that there had been a voice. "Come to me," the voice sounded again, dark and soothing, like a cat purring in his mind. "Come to me." The exiled elf blinked rapidly, mind fogging and confusion taking over his thoughts. He knew that voice. He had heard it before. It was familiar, like an old friend, a whisper in the back of his mind. "Come to me," the voice said, gentle, calm, and serene, cool in his mind like liquid shadows. Shadows. Like the shadow. Like the darkness which he hated. Didn't he? Of course he did. The shadow was evil. The shadow had killed his family. The shadow had... "Come to me, come to me, come to me." And suddenly, Amalug understood. Something flooded into him, and his eyes were opened, able to see the world as it truly was. It was not the shadow's fault that his family had died. It was their own fault. Their fault because they tried to fight the darkness. Because they did not understand. They did not understand the truth. Had he not just hated the shadow? No, that could not be right. "Come to me," the darkness commanded. So he came.